So, Mark, thanks very much, mate, for offering to come on to the Crown Command Games channel and talk all about this wonderful issue, 153 of White Dwarf.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Josh. It's this was the first White Dwarf that I ever bought myself. It wasn't the first one I read because friends of mine were buying it before me for about a year or so before me, and some of their older brothers had got copies, back copies. So I'd seen plenty, but this was the first issue that I think I'd bought myself. And the main reason for it is because this is the issue that was launching the fourth edition box for Warhammer. So friends of mine had got the third edition rules, and I was kind of getting interested in collecting things, and I hadn't really bought anything at this stage. It was all sort of just ideas simmering around in my mind. And then when this issue launched, so this is a September 1992 issue, so I would have bought this probably in the August. They normally release them, a couple of weeks before the month that they're named after. I would have bought this in the summer holidays after I finished the first year of secondary school. Around about my 12th birthday in August. And I will have bought this in WH Smith's in town, I would have thought, and brought it back home. And the great thing with this issue is, in some ways, it's not necessarily a brilliant White Dwarf issue because it's quite focused, but it really opened the door to me to what this new Warhammer was going to be. Because I'd played a couple of games of third edition, probably not by the full rules with my friend and his older brother, but just seeing that there's going to be this new boxed version that, looked to me like Hero Quest. It looked like one of the things that as a 12-year-old I could get my head around and understand. And I knew that there was going to be miniatures with the box set. This was kind of everything that I wanted to know. So it was more than just a magazine. It felt like a catalogue that was going to kind of transport me into the Warhammer hobby. I mean, obviously, you've got that absolutely fantastic front cover, which is that brilliant Jeff Taylor drawing that we see on the fourth edition box. That. And what I loved about it is it looks great on the magazine, but it looks even better in that big landscape on the box when you see it. And what you see, I remember this very vividly, the Night Goblins picture at the top left corner on the inner left there, because there's just something so iconic about the way that the Night Goblins looked. And it's almost like that image kind of burnt into my mind for years afterwards. Although I never bought any Night Goblins, never had any, but it was just something about how they looked in that big block with the three fanatics coming out. It's just that kind of captures that Hero Hammer era for me perfectly. The aesthetic anyway, with the red spears and the black cloaks. It just, and brilliantly painted as well. Yeah, so I mean, if you look on the contents page there, you see how much of the stuff is going to be about high elves. There's silver helms, there's Mike McVeigh's Warhammer Regiments thing, there's things on there about goblins. There's a battle report, which is kind of a little bit weird because I can only presume it's sort of a third edition, fourth edition kind of hybrid battle report, really. But it's when they're testing out the Warhammer magic rules, which is quite cool actually, because it doesn't go into too much of the detail about how the game's actually working. It's more about what possibilities there are for the magic system, which, as we know, when it came out, was really quite a major part of what made fourth edition so brilliant, is having this magic system that's just so kind of comprehensive and works in its own right. And this is them playing around with it. There's some really good content in here. And it's just a very subtle, very casual Citadel miniature news column there. There's about 50 words. It just says they've been very busy. Jez Goodwin's been sculpting a whole series of elves. The model shown here is a high elf wizard. That's all it says. One of the best models ever made. Just very casually, oh, here's a wizard, and you'll be able to buy that soon. And here's some Mighty Empires things as well below that. And it's just like they snuck in probably the best model release in just the most casual, understated way. Whereas now there'd be like a grand unveiling on a stage, and it's just crazy to think that techless model that is, in my view, probably the best fantasy miniature ever made, was just sort of subtly kind of just put out there as just a generic wizard. And we're never going to go to Madrid or Toronto, but nice to know that there's something there for you if you were living in those parts.
Yep, absolutely. Lucky buggers got a nice discount.
And then kind of go into this 40k World Eaters article. And I remember at the time looking at this and being completely confused what this might be. So I played Hero Quest. I'd had Hero Quest. I'd played Warhammer at my friend's house, and all I knew is that there was a sort of science fiction version of Warhammer called Warhammer 40,000. And then looking at this, it just it just seemed completely different to anything that you might have seen on TV, whether that's, you know, Star Trek or Star Wars or Blake 7 or something like that. This was like a sci-fi world to a 12-year-old that was just like, what the hell is this? This is absolutely crazy. I had no idea whatsoever what all this really meant. And all the rules seemed so complicated compared to what I'd really seen up to that point. Because I think even when I played a couple of games of 3rd edition, it was with my friend's brother, who was very much guiding us through it all, really. And roll 4 dice. Oh, okay. And then, how many 5s did you get? Oh, I got that many. And so you didn't really understand the rules. He was kind of games mastering it, and he really enjoyed that because he was a few years older. But yeah, this whole stuff, it's great looking back at it now. But I just remember looking and thinking, right, this is cool, but I've no idea what any of this means. It's just the kind of thing it looks totally like it's out of a really dry historical wargaming set of rules for like a tank in 1940 or something, and it's just got this crazy thing on it. So it's kind of this really weird combination of this really detailed approach, but with something absolutely mad going on, which is kind of cool. And then we've got these squat war machines again. I don't think I even knew that Epic existed at this point. Or maybe I did, but I remember looking at these and thinking they were absolutely brilliant. But I remember distinctly at first looking at this and thinking that maybe this was in 28mm scale, and that the figures, the squats on the picture below were full size, and then realizing, they can't be. But I was thinking how cool it'd be for that squat Colossus to actually exist as a full scale model. It'd be absolutely enormous. So this is the grand reopening of your old gaff.
My old gaff,
Oxford Plaza.
Oxford Street Plaza. Yep.
So I went to that shop once. And I don't know when it would have been. It would have been about 1994 or 1995, something like that. Because we were down in London for the day, just doing whatever. I can't remember, a bit of sightseeing or something. And I remember going into there, but I don't remember particularly much of it, and it's kind of blurred into one. But was it upstairs in the Plaza?
Yeah.
Right, okay. And because it was like a smallish sort of modern shopping centre off Oxford Street. I don't think it's even there at all anymore, the Plaza at all, from what
I have no idea, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was the only central London one, though, wasn't it? Because all the others were like, Hammersmith or wherever.
Hammersmith was the other one I went to, and that's as far as I know. I don't remember any other ones apart from that.
And then we go into the advert for it all, which looks fantastic. Some brilliantly painted models. Interestingly, they've got loads of Empire stuff out there, but and just elves, those generic elves that very kind of 3rd edition-y. But what's interesting is they've lined all the pictures up, and everything's kind of more in not quite a skirmish formation, but sort of offset and all raggedy blocks, which looks really cool, but it's not something that you're used to seeing really in White Dwarf as a sort of photography style. They generally used to try and show it looking as good as possible, but still set up for actual play, whereas this is a little bit of a different approach. But still, I remember looking at it and just thinking, oh my god, if this is what you can do if you buy this box, then I'm in. I hadn't really sort of crossed my mind, but 104 plastic miniatures, that's a lot of miniatures. And I remember this box set was £30 when it came out, and that's what I paid for it. Or what was paid for it. I had it for Christmas that year, and it was £30. And even in today's money with inflation adjusted, that's still a really brilliant price. I've sort of gone back and looked at other things at the time. If you wanted to buy a copy of Monopoly or Risk or Cluedo or something like that, you would have paid 20 or 15 then. This was not significantly more money than a couple of it was like probably the price of 2 very ordinary board games, and the kind of board games that now would set you back 20 quid each or something, and yet a starter set with 104 plastic miniatures, if you were to get such a thing, Games Workshop would probably charge you 250 quid or something nowadays, a job on it. One thing that's really interesting is in the bottom left corner there, you've got the future Warhammer releases. I mean, they've been quite bold saying what's coming out. So Warhammer Magic was like the first thing to come out, but then they're saying Warhammer Army books, everything you need to know. They include full army lists, background histories. The first book is about the armies of the Empire, released in the fall of 1992, which is strange because there's an autumn in the paragraph above. More army lists will follow, with the following books planned for release before the summer of 93: The Orcs, rather than Orcs and Goblins, Bretonnia, the High Elves, and the Dwarves. And of course, we never got the Bretonnia book in 4th edition. So they evidently were planning on Bretonnia being an important race that they were going to support, but it never came until the 5th edition. I don't quite know why, but they obviously just felt that there was just other things to move on to, and how those decisions happened at the time, I don't know, but maybe they just sold so much Empire stuff, they were pretty happy with that, and they just wanted to kind of crack on with other things, or who knows why. But yeah, there's certainly it's certainly not the first time that Games Workshop have been very explicit in saying exactly what they're going to release. I mean, the Realm of Chaos books is the classic one, isn't it, where they were saying they were going to release it, and it took them about 7 years or something like that, and Rogue Trader and all these kind of things. So but I don't imagine they would ever do that in a million years now, promise what they were exactly going to do, unless they knew for definite it was going to happen. And then we've got an advert on the right for the Wraith album, Danger Calling, with those pretty cool looking guys there, their bare chests and their leather.
Yeah, very much Spinal Tap inspired.
Yeah, and I love the fact that there's just an absolutely massive picture of the Chaos Space Marine, and then just a little picture of them. It's just they must have opened it up, going, "Oh, we're going to be in the magazine." And I was like, "Oh, there's our picture." Just the bottom left corner. They've shoved us down there, but they look pretty cool, those guys. So I think that crossover between like metal and Games Workshop was always really noticeable. It was something I'm never into metal, but like whenever you went into a Games Workshop shop or you went to something and there's people there would always be a lot of metalheads wherever you went, and there really is that crossover. I think Brian was probably pretty instrumental in deciding that, because of his love of that kind of all things spiky and chaotic. Then we've got Dwarf Rune Weapons by Nigel Stillman. So this is kind of rune rules in great detail for the next, number of pages, but it's presumably kind of legacy 3rd edition Dwarf Rune rules. I haven't really read it in detail. I don't really fully know all the 4th edition rune rules and what's similar and what's different, but I can only presume that there's an element of things that were carried across and brought into the 4th edition book, because that will have come out not very long after this. But it's pretty comprehensive, and all sorts of things on there. But as to exactly whether it all works fully in 4th edition or not, or whether you have to do a bit of adjustment, I'm not really sure. But classic sort of Nigel Stillman, very detailed kind of approach to something. But I remember, if anything, just thinking it was really cool that things like this could exist. I think that's one of the things that's great with Warhammer. I know it's a complicated game, and I know that there can be a lot of rules and you can get bogged down in a lot of special rules, but it really does add to a lot of the flavor. And I think that role-playing background to the design really comes out with something like this. Very much focused on the spearmen and the archers from the box set. I remember being a tiny bit disappointed that they showed the command models, because I thought that you'd get those in the box, because I remember the regimental champion with the sword and the antler things, and thinking, oh, that's really cool, I really want to get that model. But of course I think that they were presumably a blister pack, as with the archer command, to go alongside with what you got in the box set. But either way, you still got them. So, I mean, the plastics still hold up fantastically well, don't they? They monopose archers and spearmen. I think because they're elves and you imagine that they would stand neatly in a line and be all disciplined, then they look even better than the goblins, in my opinion, because I think it feels right that they all look the same. And I used to really like articles like this with a sort of long form, where they sat down and written, a good 1,000 words or so on this. It's not just quick, oh, here's some captions, here's some stuff, shove it in a magazine. You could sit and read this magazine. You could sit and read White Dwarf like a book, and I always really enjoyed that. I felt like it was good value as a magazine as a result. Box set, I remember I got a bit of Christmas money. So I got the box set for Christmas. I had a bit of Christmas money and I went into Birmingham probably a couple of days after Christmas. And I bought the Silver Helms box. And I never did paint them absolutely fully. I don't really know why. think I was too intimidated. And this picture is partly to blame. So for as wonderful as these heavy metal pages are, there is something when you're 12, when you look at it, you can just feel a little bit like I don't know if I can do it that well. And I remember that being a bit caught in that paralysis of being overwhelmed by what someone else could do. This is the Orc and Squat Warlords supplement for Space Marine. Like I said before, I wasn't really quite that sure what Space Marine was. And interestingly, they use the phrase epic in a sort of way to describe the scale still at this point. They're calling the game Space Marine. And they've just got that little thing down in the bottom corner, that epic battles. You know, it's just like, oh, this is just a type of gaming or an approach with a different scale, which I think is cool. But it's strange because I think that a lot of people would use the word epic now, but if you said Space Marine to them, maybe they wouldn't necessarily know that you meant that second edition epic and so on. But either way, it was something that I always kind of never bought anything for it, but I always sort of looked at it from afar as being something very cool. I think it's because none of my friends were particularly playing any of it. It was all very much fantasy battles that we were all playing for that time that was in the hobby, which was probably, certainly from Warhammer, it would be like 92 to about 94. So not very long, but yeah, it was just that high elf army that I had, really. This Night Goblin article, though, that's over the next few pages, this is very much this tempted me. This was very much what I was thinking. You know what, Night Goblins, that if I buy the box set, I could have a Night Goblin army using the goblins from it, as well as a high elf army. But funds as a person with only a paper round just didn't allow for it. And I think I was conscious as well of the huge volume of models that you needed to collect. I mean, there's a spearman unit there. I don't know how many are in that, 40 or something. They're pretty big units. And, there's the plastics in there. But if you were looking at the Night Goblins, you'd be looking at metals at the time, which I don't know how much money they would have been, but it still would have totted up to a good old amount of cash. But it was something about the Night Goblins. They definitely looked. I mean, I like the Goblin Spearmen, but I think that the Night Goblins, I'm sure you'd agree as a Night Goblin aficionado, they're just a cut above. There's just something about them that's even more definitively Warhammery. They're just really beautiful models. They're full of character. I like how they look funny and evil at the same time. They're just the exact right balance. And then we've got some rules in there for Night Goblins and how they work. I don't know if this is the first point that Night Goblins were sort of officially introduced as a thing, because I don't think third edition's got Night Goblins as such, as far as I'm aware. And it's just unusual. They're testing out the magic. They've got quite a cool scenario. They're using Bretonnians, which, as we know, weren't really a fourth edition thing, but they're still featuring them heavily here, which suggests that they really were thinking that they were going to be coming out soon. And some beautiful dwarves there, but there's also like a Kislev scout as a single character, and there's a wood elf scout in with the Bretonnians. That's quite a cool little thing. They've got this interesting scenario where there's like a tomb and there's undead that come out the tomb, and they've got to protect different things. It feels very much like the kind of game that I like to play these days, where there's a really good story to be told rather than just a pitched battle. This really sums up the kind of experience of Warhammer that I want to have. It just feels like all of the fun and all of the enjoyment that you can get from it, but none of the kind of balance issues or who's got the better side or, oh, is that fair or isn't it fair? It's kind of a lot more based around a storytelling experience. It's really cool. I like as well how it goes on for about 10 or 12 pages. It really is the kind of flagship article in this magazine. And we got a games day thing here. They've got a ticket hotline at the top, which is they've put the phone number on a lot of times, so you're not going to forget how to get tickets for that. It's funny that you had to ring someone to buy tickets. Yeah. I really like this. They've got a little rail map of how to get to the NEC, and This is just like classic Games Workshop where they're like, there is absolutely no excuse to get there. They've got a train in the bottom left that goes to Penzance, which is the bottom tip of the country. And then they've got the train that goes all the way up to Inverness in the north of Scotland. So they're covering about 700 miles worth of railway there. And they're like, there's no excuse not to get it, even if it means having an 8-hour train journey each way. That level. And then we conclude with a really nice part 2 of a story. And this was the only slightly disappointing part of this issue when I bought it, is that I hadn't read the part 1. But it's a Bill King story. And as you'd expect, really nicely written. Some relatively generic Space Marine and Battle Manual stuff for 40k. The only 40k stuff we've seen at the start was the Chaos stuff. And then this is the only picture of a normal Space Marine, I think, that you see in the whole magazine. Other than maybe the catalogue, which is crazy, really. And then we're back onto more pages of the Gotrek and Felix story. And then the steam tank, I remember looking at this and just being like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that exploded diagram as well, showing how it all goes together. Just really cool. Really, really cool. And just hilariously, I remember it saying diagram not to scale. So you just so you don't think that the steam tank is about an inch wide or something like that. But yeah, no, it's ace, isn't it? And also that little thing that you still get written on stuff, but it requires a degree of modelling skill. We do not recommend this kit for young or inexperienced modellers. So I think you'd feel really grown up if you bought one, and you were young. You'd be like, oh, I can do this. I can take on the challenge of the steam tank. And then 3 bottles of super glue and 4 hours in A&E later, you'd realise the error of your ways. I don't know whether you can track down copies of this, but it looks interesting. I've never played it. Have you played any of these games, Josh?
I've played Armageddon, Battle for Armageddon when it first came out in 92 or so, when it first came out. Yeah. I presume they're kind of more like the sort of Avalon Hill traditional type war games, more like that style. Yep, chit and counter. And event cards you can play as well. So I'd actually like to revisit that at some point and play it again. I know that Ed did on a minisodes, and it got me fired up to play it again. I would like to do it. Yeah. This is just great. And so that's the magazine from start to finish, and it's very much got that theme of, it's the Warhammer 4th edition launch issue, and what a great place to jump into the hobby. It is, mate. It's a classic issue, and it's the start and catalyst for many of us who got into Games Workshop and discovered Warhammer and discovered the bright, beautiful colours of herohammer. So thank you so much again, Mark, for sharing that with us here at the Crown of Command. And, mate, if we've got anything else we can share in the future, I'll get you back on again. Wonderful. Thank you very much for giving me the time, Josh, to reminisce and go through this. That's great. Take care.